What I want us to do today is look at King Saul and King David and kind of explore why God said Saul, he regretted making him king and took away his kingdom and gave it to King David, as well as why he stated that David was a man after his own heart. Both men sinned against God, so neither man was perfect. But why did God see Saul as a regret and see David as someone that was after his own heart, and not only gave him kingship, but promised and kept the promise of keeping the line with the king within his bloodline? So I want to start with King Saul. I want to kind of look at what he did that was a sin against God. One of the things with Samuel was a Levite, and he also was like the priest in that area at that time with Saul. He's also the one that anointed Saul to be king, as well as anointed David to be king. So with Saul, they was going to go into battle against the Philistine. And Samuel told Saul to wait 7 days and he would come and do a burnt offering to God, so to protect the soldiers, to make sure they was victorious over the Philistines. But what Saul did was, after 7 days, Samuel didn't come. He became impatient and took it upon himself to make the burnt offering instead of Samuel. That was a sin because the Levites, they was the priests, and it was certain things they had to do. They had to be clean and everything like that. So Saul doing that was disrespectful in God's eye. That was one. Another thing that King Saul did that was against what God had commanded him to do. They was getting ready to go into war with the Amalekites. God told them to go into war with the Amalekites because when they initially came out of from being slaves in Egypt, the Amalekites was very hard on them, and so God did not like that. So he told Saul to go to war against the Amalekite and destroy everything. Do not leave anything alive, including animals. Do not take anything. Everything must be destroyed. So when King Saul went into battle against the Amalekites, he did not do everything that he was told. When Samuel came to check on them, Samuel heard animals in the background, and he asked Saul about it. The first thing Saul was like, yeah, I did everything that I was commanded. And Samuel was like, you did not kill the animals. And he was like, well, we kept the best animals because the soldiers wanted to keep them and also sacrifice them to God. And then they also kept the king of the Amalekites. They kept him as well. So Saul was letting him know, this is not what God commanded you to do. He told you to destroy everything. And so that was the second thing. Well, one of the other things that Samuel did that was against God. And then another thing that Samuel did, and this was after Saul had passed away, after God had turned away from him. God was no longer speaking to Saul through prophets, and he was no longer speaking to Saul through dreams. And so, like I said, Samuel had passed away. So Saul went to a medium and asked her to consult a spirit for him. And he wanted her to consult Saul to bring Saul's spirit back so he could ask Saul what's going to happen in the war against the Philistine. And so even in death, Saul was like, Samuel was like, why are you awakening me? Why are you doing this? This is wrong. And so Samuel just basically told him that, you're going to lose. You're not going to win. And then another thing with Saul, he expressed jealousy. He was very jealous of David, and his whole mission was he wanted to kill David. Even though David did not do anything against Saul, Saul just wanted to kill David. And even though David was anointed, and you're not supposed to mess with any of God anointed, he still wanted to kill Saul. I'm sorry, he still wanted to kill David. So when you look at Saul's sins, the things he did with the with not waiting for Samuel to come after the 7 days, that was like disrespect to God and not following protocols. So he allowed his pride to, like, I can do this, instead of saying, no, let me just continue to wait, even though I'm waiting after 7 days, just let me continue to wait. He wanted to go bypass the things that are supposed to be done in order to do it for himself. So it's like he felt that he was like prideful, like I can do it. And then the second thing is with the Amalekite, he is the king. So even if his people said to him, let us keep the best of the animals and kill everything else, he was supposed to say, no, I was commanded by God to destroy everything, not to keep anything. So him saying that, oh, it wasn't me, it was my men who wanted to keep the animals and sacrifice them to you, it's like he did not take responsibility in his position as leader. He's the king, he's the leader. So the final say is actually his and not his men. So instead of him taking responsibility and saying, okay, yeah, I messed up, I didn't do everything God wanted, he still said, I did keep his commandment, and my men, not me, my men wanted to keep the animals, so that's why we kept the animals. He never took full responsibilities of his action. He put it off on someone else. He blamed someone else. And then with consulting a medium, going to a medium to, get, even though it was Samuel's spirit, he still went against what God says. Do not consult mediums. Do not worship idols. Do not do any of those things. So he's still disobeying God and doing what he wants to do by consulting a medium. And then with being jealous of being jealous of David, as a king, you cannot rule your kingdom based on emotion, especially when David didn't do anything against you. It was the people that were singing the song, Saul killed his 1,000 and David killed his 10,000. David didn't have any control over what those people were saying, but in spite of that, he still wanted to have David killed. Okay, so now looking at David, King David, and the things that he did that was considered to be sin. Once he became king over both nations, he had a commander by the name of Joab, and he asked him to go out and do a census and count the men, the soldiers, in both the Israel and on Judah, to see how many men that he had. And then another thing that he did, we know about him with Bathsheba. He seen Bathsheba. She was married to Uriah, a member of his army. He went ahead and, slept with her, got her pregnant, then ended up killing Uriah to try to cover everything up. And so that was a sin. And then another thing that he, I'm sorry, and yeah, so I'm sorry. So those two was like the two major sins that David did. And so when you look at those two sins, one, what made him, doing the census, what made it a sin was those, even though he was the king, he was over those people was God's people. God never asked him to count the people, to see how many people you had. So with him doing a census, it was like him saying, these are my people and I want to see how many I have. It's like those are God's people. Unless he asks you to count them, you don't need to worry about how many people you have in, who you have under you. And so when that happened, when he did that sin and sin against God, God told him, I'm going to give you three choices. You can either have 3 years of famine, 3 months of fleeing from your enemies or 3 days of plague. So David chose 3 days of plague. And so when that happened, God sent an angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord killed 70 men. And then the angel of the Lord was getting ready to destroy Jerusalem, and God stopped him. And when David looked up and seen the angel of the Lord standing in between heaven and earth holding a sword, he automatically fell on his face and repented, asked God to forgive him, took responsibility on himself. It was like, why should my men die? Why should these people die based on what I did? So David took responsibility. He was sorry for what he did, and he also took, like I said, took responsibility and said, this is what I did, and these people should not be suffering because of something I did. And then the same thing when he took Uriah's wife for himself and got her pregnant, and Nathan came and kind of had him judge himself. As soon as he realized what had happened and that he did wrong against God, he, repented and everything like that. And so God was like, I'm not going to kill you, because one of the things he kind of judged himself on, he said the person who did this should, you would have to, I'm going to leave the scripture in the description box. So like part of the, when he was judging himself, not knowing that Nathan was talking about him, he said, oh, whoever did this should be killed. So God was like, I'm not going to kill you, but I will kill the child. So even though God killed his child because of the sin he committed, he still did not hold that against God. He still, like I said, as soon as his child died, he got up. He was still loyal to God. He was still faithful to God, because he took responsibility and said, my child is dead because of the things I did. I killed Uriah, and I took his wife and I had him killed, so I lost a child behind that. So he didn't blame God. He blamed himself, because he knew what he did was wrong. And so he like I said, he repented, and he also took responsibility for his action. And then also another thing about King David is when the Ark of the Covenant finally was coming back to Jerusalem, David celebrated. David praised God. David was out in the streets with everyone else, celebrating the fact that the Ark of the Covenant was back in God's land with God's people in Jerusalem, and he was happy about that. He didn't care who seen him. He didn't care who judged him. He was just in the moment celebrating that God was back in their presence again. And then also with King David, he never worshiped idols. He never went to worship any type of idols, mediums, or anything like that. And why that is important is the king sets the laws. The king sets everything for the people in his kingdom. So with Saul, everything that Saul is doing is not only a reflection on Saul, but it's going to be how the people in the land look. It's like, this is what my king's doing, so it must be okay. So if he's going to go to mediums, if he's going to worship idols, and you see this with the other kings, the kings that come after David, they started worshiping idols. They pushed God to the side and brought in, other idols, and that made the people worship the other idols, and that made the people become sinful against God. So that was one of the things why God looked at Saul and regretted the things he did for Saul. Saul could not be corrected. If you are not a person that's willing to admit your mistakes and say, okay, I did wrong, don't judge the people, judge me. The things I'm doing, I should not do. He never took responsibility for his action. He's blaming people below him. You the king, but you're saying I did not withhold my commandment to God because this is what the people want. And if you think about that, you also see this story played out with Adam and Eve. God put Adam in charge of the garden. Adam was first, and God told Adam, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's what he commanded Adam not to do. Eve came along as his wife. So as his wife, Adam was supposed to make sure she understood the same thing. And then when the snake came and beguiled her and convinced her to eat from that tree, Adam, and then when she ate and said it was good, she handed it to Adam. Why would you, as the head, take the fruit from your wife instead of saying, hey, this is not something we were supposed to do. You're doing wrong. God commanded us not to eat from this tree. So therefore, I'm not going to eat from this tree. But instead, he ate and their eyes became open to the fact that they was naked. They didn't have any clothes. Then when God comes and he speaks to them, the first thing Adam did, instead of taking responsibility and said, I messed up. Yes, you commanded me not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I was supposed to make sure my wife didn't do it. Adam didn't say that. He passed the blame on Eve. It was her, the woman that you gave me, speaking to God. So it's like he blamed Eve and God. It was this woman that you gave me. But what about the commandment he gave you as well to not do it? So he did not take responsibility. So you see that, and also because Eve is following along with Adam, because Adam is the head, Adam is setting the tone. She did not take responsibility because he did not take responsibility. And the first thing she did is passed on the responsibility and said, it was this snake because it beguiled me and tricked me into eating it. So she never took on her part by, well, yeah, Adam told me not to do it, but I did it anyway. I went against my authority, which was my husband, to do something I wasn't supposed to do. So that's why it's important, if you're in a leadership position, you take ownership for the things that you do wrong. You set the tone for the people that's going to be under you. And if you're, in that position, being a preacher or a pastor or some, whoever, and you're going, the Bible is like your guideline as far as what you should and shouldn't do. And if you're going against that, then you're leading your people in the wrong direction. It's no difference than in this time. It's like comparing now to the biblical time. It's like the same. You see people based on who's in charge of them. Do they have a good attitude? Do they have a bad attitude? Are they moving in the right direction or are they moving in the wrong direction? If you have a leader that can never say, I am wrong. If you have a leader that can never say, I messed up, it was my fault, let me take on, whatever I have to deal with it, I will go ahead and deal with it. No, if he's always or she's always pointing the finger at someone else, it was their fault. If that wouldn't happen, if this, that, and other, then that's a person that is not a good leader. Because if they're going to always blame everyone else, then the people below them is going to always do the same thing. If something come up and didn't work out, they're going to find an excuse as far as, well, it was that person's fault, it was that person's fault, instead of taking on the responsibility of saying, I messed up. How can I correct myself? You can never correct a person who's not willing to admit they have made a mistake. Everyone is making a mistake and not perfect. So that's why, and then also, like I said, with King Saul, his mission was to kill David. David had two opportunities to kill Saul. Even though Saul is trying to kill him, he had two opportunities to kill Saul. And he did not, even though the people was with him was saying, go ahead and kill him, he was like, no, I'm not going to kill him because he is one of God's anointed. He respected Saul, even though Saul tried to kill him. David really had a legitimate reason to kill Saul. Saul never had a legitimate reason to want to kill David. Saul did not respect the fact that he was anointed. He was someone anointed by God. He did not respect that. So Saul was prideful. And you see in the Bible it says pride comes before the fall. Saul was so prideful that he did not want to listen to anyone. Saul was so prideful that he just wanted to do any and everything that he wanted to do. And then he, never took criticism, never took directions or anything like that. So that's why the kingship was taken away from Saul and his bloodline and give it to David. And that's why God I'm sorry, that's why God, I'm sorry, the word slipped my mind, but that's why God regretted making Saul king. And then with David, because every time David was called out on something he did wrong, David accepted it. David acknowledged it. David repented. And David felt, bad about it. And David took on the responsibility as, it's my fault. Don't take out your judgment on the people. Take it out on me because I'm the one who did wrong. And because I'm the one who did wrong, they're following me, their king. And even when he was a child, you see when he killed Goliath, he said, because Goliath is speaking against God, and he did not like the fact that Goliath was speaking against God. So he was like, I'm going to kill him because of God. So he always had faith in God. He always, with the Psalms, you see him talking about God, and he just loved God even from a young age, to the point that no matter what happened between him and God, he repented. He never turned from God. He never turned to mediums and everything like that. He is the only king that never sought out mediums. He is the only king that never turned to worshiping idols. So therefore, when the people was under David, they did not worship idols. So that's why God looked at David as being a man after his own heart. So I will leave all the scriptures in the description box because I always encourage that you read the Bible for yourself, so you would be able to go in and read the different scriptures that I'm talking about, and just be able to see it for yourself. Peace.